But here's the first question for us tonight. Why can't the congregation pick the songs? So this is a real practical question. You know, there's not necessarily a Bible verse that has to do with who chooses the songs that somebody sings. We know the Bible does tell us to sing. It commands us to sing, both Old Testament and New Testament. In Colossians, for example, Paul says to sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs to the Lord. We have the example of Jesus and the apostles singing hymns. The Old Testament is full of psalms, with the book of Psalms being a perfect example of songs that were sung by the Jewish synagogues later on, by the assembled festivals and things like that. So throughout the Bible, we see singing and the joyous opportunity for God's people to come together and praise God in song. Practical reason for that is if we're all going to give God praise audibly, verbally, then it helps if we all do it at the same time. And singing is just one of the most practical ways to do that. You know, we could just go around the room and everybody take their turn and give God praise that way. But it's a lot more efficient, and there's a lot of joy that comes in music and singing. So a lot of good reasons that God gave us music. But when it comes to the practical situation of week in and week out, planning a worship service and choosing songs, not only which songs are we going to sing this Sunday and then the next Sunday, but also just what songs are we going to pick in general to put on our menu of songs, basically, that we choose from. We have to have a limited number of songs. We can't do endless songs. I mean, there's enough songs if we wanted to. We could sing a brand new song, a new group of songs every week and never repeat any of them. You know, there's that many songs out there. CCLI numbers, they start in like 6-digit numbers and they go up to 8 and 9-digit numbers, I think. So there's literally thousands, if not millions, of songs out there. Some you've never heard of, and some of those even with good reason. Because some of them aren't that good, and that's why you haven't heard of it. But there's lots of good songs out there too. So when it gets down to the practical situation of why and how do we choose songs, let me give you an example of why it may be difficult for just anybody in the congregation to say, well, here, let me pick the songs this week. Here's a list of 5 songs that I like. Why don't we sing these? You know, and I think that's, some people kind of wonder, well, why can't we do that? You know, why doesn't it work like that? Or why don't we just show up on Sunday morning and say, yeah, who's got a song we should sing? And Ernie says, hey, here's my favorite one. And the band says, okay, let's play that one. And then, you know, Miss Betty has one she wants to sing. And okay, we play that one. We kind of did that when I was a kid in church. But we limited to the hymnal. You know, you could choose out of the hymnal and call them out. It was only once in a while we did that. But, you know, once in a while they'd have a service and they'd say, okay, we're going to let the church choose, so yell out a hymn or raise your hand or however they did it. And you'd say, you know, hymn such and such, and they'd say, okay, let's sing it. And it would work okay, but they were songs that were fairly well known. The musicians were going to know how to play them for the most part. And, you know, like I said, you had a limited list of songs you could choose from, even though the hymnal does have a lot of songs in it. But anyway, just from a practical perspective, here's how do we actually choose a song? How does a song make it into a set list on Sunday morning? This may actually be a more complicated process than you realize. And this actually goes to answer part of the question about why the congregation can't choose songs or can't just say, you know, let's sing this song and then we do it. Like I said, there's actually a process that we go through, and it does get to be a little bit complicated in some situations. So let's go, and we're going here from the most broad questions to the more narrow questions that are going to function more in our specific context. Now, this is the first question, and this is how a song gets past security. That's the way I say it. You know what I mean by gets past security? Like, you're not even allowed in the door if you don't pass this test. Okay, so is the song biblical in its content? Is it theologically accurate? Is it true? Is it pushing us toward a biblical view of God and man and the theological themes that it's singing about? So is the song biblical? In all of the questions that I'm going to give you up here on the screen, if the answer is yes, then it's a potential song we may use. But if any of these 5 questions get answered no, then that song is out. So if the song is not biblical, if it's not true, if it has problematic theology or lyrics through a certain part of the song, then the answer is no, and that one is eliminated from contention and would not be used. So, but after we find out if the song's lyrics are biblical and true, what else do we need to think about? Next is musical quality and corporate. Is it a good corporate song? Well, I'll tell you what I mean by that in a minute. But first of all, music quality. Is it written well? Is the music is it written well from a music perspective? Just the quality of the music. Is it a well-written song? And also lyrically, is it a good quality song, or does it sound like a 5-year-old, spit it out in the bathtub? So if it's just quality-wise, it's not good, then probably not a good idea for us to use it. This would be one of my criticisms of a lot of praise music that kind of came out of the 70s and 80s. A lot of it's just not very good music. Musically, it's very boring. It just uses, musically, it's just using the bass chord and maybe the 4 and the 5 chords, and it's not even, just not much musical variation, not very interesting. The lyrics may not be all that well thought through, not very poetic, not very, not a whole lot of good, strong imagery in it. So just, the song just may not be that good of quality, and in that case we would probably want to leave it. Is it a good corporate song to sing? Now that's an important one that you may not always think about, because you may hear a good song on Christian radio and you're like, I love this song's great, I really worship to this when I'm driving down the road in my car, when I'm listening to it at home. But sometimes songs that bands sing or that individual singers sing and get popular on the radio, they don't always function well for people as a group to sing together. Sometimes they function well for a solo artist to be able to sing, and there's a lot of inflections in the voice and a lot of runs and places where the notes are held up for a really long time that most people can't sing, or the vocal range it's really low in some parts of the song and really high in other parts, which a talented singer can do, but most people are uncomfortable singing that wide of a range. All of these things come into play when we're talking about choosing songs. So is it a good song corporately? Is it a good quality song lyrically and musically as well? So if we have to answer no to any of those, the song's going to be thrown out of contention once in a while. But if the answer is yes, once again, then we can move on to the next one. Does it fit with our musical style? Now you can see that this is getting a little bit more specific to our specific context here at New Song. So, it wouldn't function well if to have a church that did a really modern band-driven rock song, and then the band stopped playing, and then they fired up the pipe organ next, and they sung this long plodding hymn and everything. Now, there's parts of me that would like that, because I like modern music and I like hymns too. I enjoy both of those. But it would be hard to have a cohesive worship experience when you're trying to put vastly different musical styles together. So when you have a certain set of musicians and a certain set of instruments, you're going to be somewhat limited in the styles of music that are going to work well with that. And then there's also going to be a preference. Some churches are going to be more traditional, some of them are going to be more contemporary, some of them are going to be very modern and edgy, some of them are going to be more of a R&B gospel flavor of music that they do. All kinds of different flavors. Some of them are going to be very subdued and maybe just have a keyboard or a piano and sing more hymn-like, whether it's modern hymns or whatever. There's going to be a certain music style that's going to fit, and that's one of the questions that you have to ask: does it really fit with our musical style, what our band can play, and everything? So there's some cohesiveness to the worship experience at any particular church. So that's one question that's going to have to be yes. If it doesn't fit with our musical style, if it's not going to fit well with the kind of music our band plays, then it's probably going to be difficult for us to use it in a corporate worship setting. All right. So, but let's say the answer to that question is yes. Then the next one we're going to ask is, does it resonate with our worship leader? Now this is one of the situations that I think a lot of people may not really think about, but because I've been a worship leader in context before, this is something that I'm especially aware of. You know that you like some songs better than others, right? The preference. The worship leader is the same way. And when a worship leader chooses what songs to play, they are going to worship. They're going to lead better with songs that they like and songs that they enjoy, rather than if they were doing a group of songs that they were like, I don't really like singing these songs, but I know everybody wants me to play them, so I'm just going to do it. Now that's not to say that the worship leader should only choose his favorite songs, and there's not times that he should pick songs that may not be his favorite, but he knows other people like them. There should be some of that. But as a whole, you want to worship well as a worship leader. So when I was a worship leader, I would choose songs that I thought were theologically insightful, that really spoke to me well, because I felt like I could teach with those and I could lead with those better than with songs that I didn't really like and didn't really enjoy. So does this song resonate with our worship leader? Now, here's a place that we just need to be realistic and realize that we have chosen someone to be a worship leader and to fill this role in our church. If I was the worship leader of our church, I would probably choose different songs. I would choose, I think the songs that I would choose would overlap a lot with what Shane chooses, because I think he chooses great songs. There's probably some songs that Shane uses that I might not use if I was leading worship, for various reasons, musically, all kinds of different reasons. There's some songs that I would use that he wouldn't like to use. And you could multiply that for anybody. We're going to have different preferences and things like that. But when you put somebody in leadership over a ministry, you want to give them the freedom and the opportunity to lead that in the way that they want to, without them feeling like, oh, well, you're telling me how to do my job, basically. So there is a certain element there where you put somebody in charge of something and you let them choose the songs they want to choose. When it comes to a worship leader, you let them use their wisdom, and there is opportunity for input and for stretching and things like that. There's no doubt about that. We're not saying that Shane is infallible, or that I don't ever suggest songs, or that other people don't suggest songs that he uses, and all these things. But for the most part, we want Shane to use songs that that he likes, he enjoys, and he enjoys leading with. And of course, that goes for any worship leader of any church. So let's say all these things are in place. It's a biblical song. It's a good corporate song to sing, good musical quality. It does fit with our music style, and Shane likes it a lot. What's the last criteria that we would look at? Down here, it is, does it fit the band's instrumentation and ability? When you're playing with drums, a bass guitar, an electric guitar, there are going to be some songs that work well with that. And there are going to be some other songs that don't work as well if you don't have a keyboard in the mix. And in the same way, if you're leading keyboard-driven music, there are going to be some songs that work well with that it's going to be hard for a band to do. So it has a lot to do with, okay, who is actually on stage playing? On weeks that I have to fill in for Will on bass guitar, Shane a lot of times will choose some songs that have an easier bass part, because he's a really good bass player and I'm not. I feel my way around and I try to fill in and try to not make too many mistakes. But Will is actually really good, and he's talented. He played like upright bass in college and everything, so he's really good at what he does. He might dumb it down a little bit for me, to help me out. And if I was having to play every week, then that would come into consideration. If there was a song, maybe he liked it a lot, maybe it fit all of these things, but it just had a really difficult bass part, he might say, I don't think Brent can handle that one, so we're just not going to be able to play that song, most likely. Or maybe he could rewrite the bass line to something more simple or something like that. There are ways he can work around and overcome some of these obstacles, but sometimes you just have to say the answer is no, so we can't really use that song. So there's a lot that actually goes on behind the scenes in choosing songs, and that's not even to mention how do songs fit together in a set, how do the keys work. Maybe one of our vocalists has a cold this week, and they need to sing songs that are in the lower part of the range, so I'm going to choose some songs that are not in that are not hitting real high notes. So I'm going to choose some songs this week that are staying mostly in the lower range. All kinds of different factors that come into consideration. So this can get to be a pretty complicated thing that a lot of people don't realize. And if you don't have a lot of experience with music, some of the things I'm saying may sound pretty foreign to you, but I want you to at least trust me as somebody that knows a little bit about music that these are concerns and considerations that need to come into play. So we have a list here and a kind of a system of the way things work. Now, I wrote this and put this together for our question night, so it's not like Shane and I have been looking at this for years and this is how we work through everything. But I did talk to him some about this, and he said he thought this was a good grid to work through and think about what songs we were playing, and he said he thought it functioned well to try to explain it to everybody as far as what has to go into that. So let me pause here and see if there's any questions that you have up till this point. Yeah, Sean.
Yeah, a comment and question. I didn't realize, I play the drums in the band, obviously, but I didn't realize there was so much that went into it. And that just makes me love New Song that much more in the leadership, to know that the gospel here and God's word here and the worship here is so closely guarded that even the songs we sing go through a greatly scrutinized process. That is so cool. Mm-hmm. And I was also wondering, how often does the songs, do you and Shane have the songs jive with the message that's being spoken?
Yeah, that's a good question. How often do we plan a service, or plan the songs to go with one? We really don't do that on purpose very often. One thing that you may notice is that we'll often have a song that goes well with the message, and you may think that was planned, and it actually wasn't. We just trust that God will work some of those things out sometimes, either with the scripture reading that's chosen or the songs that are chosen, that things integrate well. For example, my message this week was on, I was actually talking about the situation that brought about the Nicene Creed and everything. I didn't tell Shane that, and he chose as our closing song the Creed, and it just worked out perfectly. So God works those things out sometimes.
You guys have any plan on Easter? Like all the songs
Easter
about?
Now Easter we do plan. We plan Easter service out about a week and a half or 2 weeks in advance. So there is a little bit more thought process that goes through that particular week, because that is a big, important week. But most weeks, most weeks we don't plan out explicitly. Now, what will happen more often than working through the entire set list will be if I know I have a message on a particular theme and a song comes to mind that says this song would go well with that, is I'll say, hey Shane, I think this song would work well this week, and he'll include it in the list. But as far as like working through the whole list or anything like that, that's what he does. And because of his schedule, he's a little bit unique in that he works a full-time job during the week, and he's our worship leader part-time and travels down from Richmond on the weekends and things like that. So it's not like he's Monday and Tuesday all day spending at work and me and him are communicating about this. We do communicate throughout the week, but a lot of times it's on the weekends when he's working through the set list and everything. So it is interesting to see how it works out sometimes. Sometimes it's planned, sometimes it's not. But one of my philosophies about music and coordinating services is I would rather have two things that are done well and resonating with the people that are leading those aspects of worship, rather than try to coordinate them on a theme and kind of try to make a square peg fit in a round hole, that kind of thing. I just trust that God can order things well enough to make, even if things aren't, even if you got two different themes, that maybe they fit together somehow for somebody. So, well, let's look at a couple different things that I would want you to keep in mind as we talk about this particular. When we're evaluating songs, and when you think about songs that you like, sometimes I'll notice that people can tend to be a little bit overcritical about songs. And I say that as somebody that I tend to be a little more theologically discerning than probably the average Christian. And I pay attention to the lyrics of songs and think it's important that we sing biblical songs. And sometimes I hear songs on either in a worship setting, not here, but maybe other places, and I'm like, I don't think the theology is real strong in that song. I don't think I would use that one if it were me. And then, there's other times on Christian radio, I'll hear something, I'll be like, I wish they wouldn't sing that. So I'm somebody that can be a little bit critical, and I recognize in myself the tendency for that to go overboard and become overly critical. So I understand where people are coming from with this, but sometimes we can be overly critical about songs, and I want to warn you a little bit about that. And here's some areas that I see that happen sometimes. When I see people critique songs, here's some areas that I think people can get a little bit too harsh in the ways that they're judging. Number one is in artistic imagery. So music is art, and I think it's best when songs use imagery that is tied to biblical texts. I like that. But I also recognize that there is a place in music for imagery and metaphors to come in from just regular human experience and things that speak well to people. You want songs that make your mind work and help stir up emotion and things like that. So for example, David Crowder wrote a song a number of years ago called How He Loves, and he got a lot of criticism for one of the lyrics in that song. It was, heaven meets earth like a sloppy wet kiss, and my heart beats violently inside my chest. And a lot of people said, oh, sloppy wet kiss, that's disgusting. Why would anybody sing that? And that's kind of one of those things that I would agree, maybe a little bit borderline. Now, one side of me says, that's vivid imagery when you think about heaven meeting earth. When Jesus came down to meet creation, the impact was like an unexpected, kiss where, it's just, that's what it is. You can't, it's just strong imagery. You think of the...
Apologize afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
You think of the middle school 7th grader who's got his girlfriend and he's just, it's his first kiss and he doesn't know how to do it, and it's disgusting.
Yeah.
But think about how vivid of an image that is of God coming to creation. So some people say that's disgusting. That's too distracting to be an effective image of the song, and that may be the case. In fact, David Crowder went back and rewrote that lyric to be unforeseen kiss instead of sloppy wet kiss. So that's an example, kind of an egregious example of imagery that's strong and vivid and can take over and may be prone to some people criticizing. I'm kind of on the fence on that one. But you can, there's imagery that's not that strong and not that far out there. And it's easy that you can just listen to it and say, where's that coming from? But we don't listen to it sympathetically and with an artistic ear and say, what is that imagery really driving at? And is it really accomplishing something in the part of the song, in the song itself? So sometimes I hear people say, oh, well, this song just focuses too much on myself and my feelings, and there's not enough theological content. And there's no doubt that can be true of songs sometimes. Some songs do go overboard and really don't have much biblical content at all. But sometimes I hear this criticism of songs that actually do have some good biblical content. And one of the things that I would want to remind people is that, there are a lot of times when the Bible itself talks about our feelings and how we react and our emotions that are a result of God's working in us. So it's not like the Bible never talks about feelings and emotions and things like that. So if the Bible and the Psalms can do that, if God saw fit to do that in Scripture, I don't think there's any reason that songs can't do that. Now, like I said, I don't want the song to be exclusively about that. I want there to be good God-centered theology in the song as well. But just because a song does sing about our emotion and our response to God, that's not necessarily an avenue for legitimate criticism of the song.
And sometimes people misunderstand too. Like when I saw Jamie Grace in concert, she's talking about a song of hers because she talks about being a virgin and how she's going to wait till she's married and everything. And yet her lyrics are talking about how I love him and how he's the only one I think about. And what they weren't getting is she was talking about God. She wasn't talking about a man, she was talking about God. And that's what she had to explain to everybody. She says, I'm not talking about a man, I'm talking about God. I love him and stuff.
Yeah. Now that's kind of another avenue, because I would say that's okay for a song you listen to on the radio. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to sing in a worship context songs that were confusing God and our boyfriend
Right.
or girlfriend, because that, some kind of crossover bands do sing these kind of cryptic songs about, oh, I'll love you forever and you're so wonderful. And it's like, is he singing about God or is he singing about, his girlfriend? I don't know.
Right.
We don't. So, okay, if they want to do that on the radio, in a concert, things like that, I don't necessarily have a problem. But those aren't the songs we're going to choose to sing in our worship context as well. That's one of those differences. Is it a good corporate song, or is it more of a solo song for an artist to sing? Song is too repetitious. The Bible's really, really repetitious. Sometimes check out Psalm 136. His love endures forever. His love endures forever. His love endures forever. Okay, that's a great example. Sometimes the Bible's repetitious. Sometimes it's okay for songs to be repetitious. Now, of course, it can go overboard, and it can get really bad, and that would go to a song that's poorly written. But some amount of repetition is not a bad thing. And then uncharitable reading of lyrics. What do I mean by that? I mean that sometimes you can read a song really critically and say, oh, well, I'm going to nitpick and find every error that I can in the lyrics of a song. But the thing that you don't realize is if you actually read that sympathetically, if you read that from the perspective of the person that's writing it, you find out that maybe they actually meant biblically orthodox things, not biblically wrong things. So I think it's always better for the song to be clear. But when you have a lyric or a verse that's maybe you could read it this way or maybe you could read it that way, I think our job is, for the most part, to give the songwriter the benefit of the doubt that they are meaning it the biblical way. And sometimes that falls on the worship leader to explain it in the biblical way, or some of our songs I will actually use punctuation to clarify a biblical meaning versus a non-biblical meaning.
Like that one song, My One Defense, My Righteousness, and then you changed it a little, like His righteousness, so you know.
Yeah, that, what is that, Cornerstone? Mm-hmm. My one defense, and then, oh yeah, that's a good, because I did that one. I actually put in quotation marks, you are, the contraction. You're my righteousness. We don't sing you're my righteousness, we sing my righteousness. But to make it clear to everybody, saying, it's not my one defense is my righteousness. It's my one defense, you're my one defense, you're my righteousness. And understood that way, it's perfectly biblical. To understand my defense would be my own righteousness would be unbiblical. And that's an example of giving the songwriter the benefit of the doubt. That I think that's what they meant. And we just used our, the lyrics on our screen to clarify that in everybody's mind, to make sure that it's clear. So we want to read the lyrics charitably. Now there may be sometimes that you do your best to do that, and you still say, I'm trying as best as I can, but the song still just doesn't pass the test. So we're just going to leave it out and not sing that one. So yeah, sometimes that does happen. All right, let me give you a few other things to think about. In the idea of just the job of the worship leader in choosing songs. First of all, I like to say the worship leader has the hardest job in a local church. And why is that? It's because everybody thinks they can do the worship leader's job. Now, I don't mean that you think you can get up and sing at the microphone, and I don't mean that you think you can play the guitar, but everybody thinks they can pick out the songs. I mean, everybody thinks, give me a couple minutes, and I'll come up with 5 good songs for us to sing on Sunday. Everybody feels like they can do that, and because of that, everybody feels the freedom to critique and even criticize the song selection. At least that's my experience. Now, you guys are a great church and very cooperative, and so I think there's probably a lot less of that here than there is in a lot of churches. But I do think the worship leader has the hardest job in the church because of that. So if you were in that situation where you were in a very visible leadership role and you were choosing songs every week, you can imagine that it could get pretty frustrating if you always felt like people were saying, oh, well, that first song, I wish we wouldn't have sang that one. And then the next person out there was like, well, I like that one, okay, but this third one, that's going to... It would really wear on you and everything. So one thing that I want to encourage you is to be encouraging to Shane, to a worship leader, because he does have a hard job. Music is a very personal thing. There's a lot of preference involved. It's impossible to make everybody happy. hopefully you can make a lot of people most of the way happy, but you can't make everybody happy all the time, and maybe you can't even make some of the people happy all of the time or some of the time, or any of those things. So he's got a tough job. The worship leader has a tough job in the church. Here's the second one. The mature believer is easily edified. So yeah, it may not be your favorite song, and it may not have just overflowing amounts of theological content. It may be a rather simple song. It may have a lot of repetition there. But if you are mature in your faith, then you should be able to find something in that song, maybe a line that makes you reflect back on a particular Bible verse or passage or a particular event or time in your life. And you say, you know what, this song reminds me of that, and I'm thankful for that because of that. So we're easily edified when we're mature believers. And one thing that I would remind you is that as a church, as a small church, our music quality is much, much higher than it should be for a church of our size. And this is actually going toward Shane and our band in particular. When we have people come in from the Bridge Network or from the SBC of Virginia that work with a lot of area churches and everything, they will tell me, your band is really good. I know churches that are 3 and 4 times the size of your church that would kill to have music of the quality that you guys have.
That's right.
So we have music of much higher. Yeah, I think Sean's is he our only band member here?
That's all right.
That's
Sean.
You don't really have a band without drums.
But,
Keep me humble,
yeah,
please.
Shane does a phenomenal job. Our band does a phenomenal job for us.
They do.
And I'm so thankful for
Brent,
it.
Cindy and I have been in just about every church in the association. That is true. We have visited them, and I've served some, and I've done conferences in some.
Yeah.
This church has a solid, great worship leaders team.
Yeah. Definitely.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the people that are on that stage.
Mhm.
They are truly saved and they love the Lord. It comes
Yeah.
through to all of us.
Yeah.
That is so true,
It
because
goes through to all
because
of
I
us.
know that so many of them are so desperate in wanting to have a worship team that they'll put anybody up there quickly. And that is so sad.
Lou's been up there on the tom-toms.
Who?
Lou's been up there on the bongos or whatever. I like that. It adds
Tom.
it adds something.
Yeah, the bongos.
I told Shane
I don't know if they're
played
bongos or congos. I always get them mixed up.
I think it was a wood block.
Now they're tom-toms.
Yeah. But, on the drums.
That's great.
Play the triangle.
Now, I also, in getting ready for this one, I also talked to Shane and I said, what if some people do have songs they want to suggest, and they say, this is a really good song, and I think it may be a good one for us. And I talked with him, and now I don't want you to go and make your list of your top 20 songs and dump it on Shane Sunday morning. But he said he's willing to take suggestions, and for you to say, here's a song that I know that I like it a lot, and ask, would you consider doing this one? And it may be that he hasn't heard the song and he has to go listen to it. So it may be helpful for you to write down on a piece of paper, here's the name of the song, here's the band that sings it, those kind of things. And let him go listen to it a little bit. But like we talked about earlier on, it's a complicated process that a song has to go through before it actually makes it on stage. So don't have your feelings hurt if you like a song a lot and you say, this is a great song, why won't he play my song? Don't get your feelings hurt, because there are a number of different things that come into play when considering what songs to use. And I would also say one of the comments I get probably most common is, "Oh, I wish we did more hymns." And I understand that, because I like hymns a lot as well. But one of the things that a lot of people don't realize that don't have as much musical background is that traditionally styled hymns have a very distinctive meter and time not time signature, that's not the right word, but the meter and the rhythm that appears in a hymn is very distinctive, and it works well on a piano, but it does not necessarily work well with a band setup, and that just has to do with the instrumentation, like I was talking about earlier. So it's difficult for a band to play a hymn in a traditional kind of way. Now you'll notice that our band does some songs like "Lord, I Need You" and "Cornerstone" that are remade hymns for a modern worship style that a band can play a lot more easily. But it is really difficult for a band to play traditionally styled hymns. So that's just one thing to be aware of. I know some of you have said that to me. I don't know if anybody particular in this room that said that to me, but I've had a number of people say, I wish we did more hymns. And that's one of the reasons when I'm playing with my guitar, sometimes I'll try to do it more. And Sean will even tell you when we do that, he has a really hard time playing drums with that. And a lot of times he'll play bongos instead of the drum set on those because the rhythm is really hard to get it to match. And that's just an illustration to show you that it's instrumentation and just real practical music things that come into play sometimes when we're choosing which songs do we like and which ones do we want to sing and actually put in the set.